Good evening. I couldn't figure out whether to say morning or afternoon. Good evening. This is June 2nd, Wednesday night Bible study. My name is Doug Griffin. We're in the book of Matthew going through for a couple years now, starting in Matthew chapter 1. We're finally in Matthew chapter 26. Jesus is being put on trial. He is being put on, there are actually six different courts he appears in over this time period. Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane. Judas came up, gave him a kiss, and said, "That's the." Well, no, he didn't say that's the guy. He said, "The guy that I kissed, that's him," because Jesus looked like just a normal person. He wasn't glowing. He didn't have wings. He didn't float. He didn't have that beard and that hair and that look. That European look. He looked like a Jewish guy, like anybody else. Um, and so they had to identify him. He'll be the guy I kissed. So they grab Jesus, they take him, they put him on trial. Again, there's six different courts he's going to appear at during this evening. They had their Passover dinner, even though they had it the day before Passover. So again, and many people call it the Passover Supper, but Jesus was the Passover lamb. So on Passover, when they were all killing the lambs, and he was killed on Passover, his blood was shed on Passover. So the trial, all that happens the day before. Um, so they've taken him. His first trial was with Annas. Annas was God's choice for high priest, but and he went into power. I don't know about probably the year Jesus was born, but around 15 A.D., when Jesus was 15 years old, uh, the Romans came in and they put his son-in-law Caiaphas and appointed him high priest. Now that meant nothing to the Jews. It was like, you can put, but Annas is the high priest. So, because then it's an appointment for life, like the Supreme Court. So he was for life. So that's who they take him to first. We know that because of John's recounting of what happened. And they take him to this courtyard. So imagine an apartment building with a big front courtyard. Annas comes out on the balcony. Caiaphas is going to come out on his balcony, but they're all in the courtyard, right? And the buildings are around the courtyard. So Matthew chapter 26. This is our part 8, starting with verse 57. I'm just kind of reviewing where we left off last week. And those who laid hold of Jesus led him away to Caiaphas the high priest. This is Matthew 27:57, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But John, in John 18, verse 13, it says, and they led him away to Annas first. Now, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were written around the same time. They all complement each other. They all cover the same things. John really wrote his gospel as kind of a corrective. As an addition. Let me just straighten out a couple things because I was there, and let me add a few details that are not in what we call the synoptic gospels. So that's why he says they took him to Annas first, because everybody had read the other thing, but it's the same courtyard, same apartment building. So they led him away to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. And in John 18, verse 15, it says, and Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. And I don't know why John was always cute and not identifying himself. He didn't want to brag. Some wonderful disciple, the disciples who Jesus really loved. Actually, that's how I would write it. I would do the very same thing. And the cute one, he was there too. And then you just have to guess who I'm referring to. So John says, so did another disciple. And now that disciple, the one that he's not going to mention, was known to the high priest and went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter stood at the door outside. So John walked right in, and Peter's like, all right, can we go into the courtyard? I don't know. Then the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, and I'm going to have to investigate that connection because I've read different things. So I don't know why I don't know if he was related or something, but the high priest knows who I am. Okay. So this disciple who was known to the high priest, he went out and he spoke to her who kept the door. and brought Peter in. Can you bring my friend in? It's okay if my friend can come in. Okay. So then the servant girl who kept the door, as Peter's walking by, says, you are not, aren't, basically says, aren't you also one of this man's disciples? Right? You're also one of, because she knew that John was. So when she says also, that means she was referring to John. I know John's one. Now, she wasn't mad about it. Otherwise, she wouldn't have let John in. But Peter totally was freaking out. And he said, I am not. No, I don't even know the guy who just vouched for me. So, verse 18. Now the servants and officers who had made a fire of coals stood there, because the courtyard's obviously outside, and for it was cold, and they warmed themselves. And so Peter stood with them and warmed himself. Like, I'm a stand. Those are my friends. I'm not with John. I don't. Yeah, he may know Jesus. I don't know it. I'm just here because I saw the little fire, and just cold. John 18 verse 21. So he's now back to what's going on with the trial. And he says, why do you ask me? So, because they're asking, are you Jesus? And are you, and right? And so in verse 21, he says, why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. Indeed, they know what I said. And he's, because they're asking Jesus all these questions, and by tradition, they weren't supposed to question the witness. This is where we were ending last week, on the grounds that he might incriminate himself. You can't try to trick a witness into an answer that's going to mess himself up. So if there's a charge against somebody, you have to bring the people who were charging him and have them testify. You can't just, why did you kill your wife? You can't, you can't try to trick them, right? So Jesus says, why are you asking me these questions? Bring in some witnesses and ask them what I said. So John 18 verse 22. And when he said these things, one of the officers who stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, do you answer the high priest like that? And Jesus answered him, if I've spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why do you strike me? And Annas didn't have an answer. Because he hadn't said anything evil. He just said, you're not supposed to be doing this. Bring in the witnesses. And if that's not the law, then why are you hitting me? And since they didn't have an answer, in verse 24 says, well, then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. They didn't say because they didn't have an answer. So he says, that's true. I'm privately interviewing you, and I'm not supposed to be doing that. So let me take you go to the official high priest and let them actually have a court, a real one, right? So they take Jesus just simply across the courtyard. Not a new location, just, I don't know, 100 feet away to where Annas lived. So back to Matthew chapter 26. So that's the little details that John's filling in because he was there. Matthew 26, verse 58. But Peter followed him at a distance to the high priest's courtyard. So Peter's watching Jesus over there talking to Annas, and now he's being taken over the Caiaphas. So he's watching. Okay, I think I'll follow him and move a little closer. And he went in and he sat with the servants to see the end. So I'm going to just scoot on a little closer to hear what they're saying to Jesus. Hopefully he could talk himself out of this. And then we can get back to doing what we were going to do. Because Peter was the one who's saying, not so, Lord, they will not take you. You're going to go. And Jesus kept saying, no, they are taking me. I am going to be crucified. No, you aren't. So Peter's still waiting for Jesus to come up with something great to get himself out of this. That's why he's there. If it's going to go south, he's not going down with him. But if Jesus comes up with something wonderful, then he's going to say, oh, that's my guy. Like those fair weather fans, like if the team is losing, I'm out of here. I hate them. But if they're winning, I'm going to put on their colors and carry their flags. And so that's what Peter, Jesus figures this out. I'm gonna tell him I was there the whole time, Jesus. I had your back. So Peter followed him at a distance. Verse 59. It should be 59. Yes. Now, Matthew 26. Now the chief priests, the elders, and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death. So now, right, it's a bigger course. It was just Annas at first kept questioning him and the guards who were holding Jesus. How dare you talk to him like that? But now everyone's getting involved. Oh, there's going to be a trial. Wake up. Come on over here. Okay. And they wanted to do it and get it over with because Passover was the next day. And you're not supposed to try anybody on a feast day. And that was the next day. So we're not going to mess up We are going to get this over with. Although they weren't supposed to try people at night either, but it's an emergency. So now the chief priests, the elders, all the councils are looking for false testimony of Jesus to put him to death. They're going through the crowd. What did you hear? What did you hear? But they found none that was credible. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. That's what it says. But at last, 2 false witnesses came forward and said, this fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. Now, Jesus, of course, said, when they asked Jesus for a sign, why the very first time, again, twice he went into the temple at the very beginning of his ministry, like the first day of his ministry, he went in. And then at the very end, he had just gone in a few days, right before this trial. And so they said, well, what gives you authority to come in and knock over tables and quote scripture and do everything you're doing? And he said, here's the sign. They said, give us a sign. The sign, you're going to be just like Jonah. And if you destroy this temple, referring to his body, it will be raised in 3 days. That'll be the sign. So that's what he said. But he said he's going to destroy the temple. Okay. So in Matthew 26, verse 62, it says, and the high priest arose and said to him, well, do you answer nothing? I mean, you just said you're going to destroy the temple. Well, so Jesus is not going to answer foolishness. And plus, here's the deal. Jesus told the disciples, there are many things that I could say to you, but I'm only going to say what God tells me to say. I just do what I see the Father doing. I'm being obedient. So that I could call on the 12 legions of angels, but I'm not going to do that because God's not telling me to do it. So he's our example of just speak when God tells you to speak, just do what God tells you to do, and then you remain in his will. You still won't have a life of ease necessarily, and then you'll be a millionaire. No, but you'll at least know that God's got your back. He's protecting you, that you're doing what he asked you to do. And so there were times Jesus didn't speak because God didn't give him anything to say, not because he couldn't think of anything. If God didn't say speak, he just stared at them. So do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you? Verse 63, but Jesus kept silent. And the high priest answered and said to him, I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. Now that's the English translation. Tell us if you are. There's not an if there. He just says, tell us. You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. He just he said the statement. You're the Christ, Son of the living God. And that's why Jesus says, yes. Jesus said, it's as you said. Because you just said it. So he didn't really ask him to repeat it. He just made the statement, and Jesus had to either say, yes, it's true, or no, it's not. So, of course, Jesus said, yes, it's true. Now, in Matthew 26, the second part of verse 64, it says, nevertheless. So, yeah, that part is what you said is true. I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man. You, talking to Caiaphas, will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Now, there's a difference between coming with the clouds up to heaven in the vision in Daniel, and people confuse this, understandably. They have a vision of the Ancient of Days sitting on the throne, and they see the Son of Man coming with the clouds up to heaven. Coming with the clouds up to heaven. But then there's a different prophecies about him coming on the cloud, riding on the clouds down to earth to administer judgment. So coming with the clouds, riding on the clouds, 2 different things. When he's saying you're going to see me riding on the clouds, sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. And then the high priest freaks out, of course, because he's claiming to be, I'm the wrath of God and I'm going to be coming, right? So in verse 65 says, and the high priest tore his clothes, saying, he has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witness? We don't even need to, whether he said he's going to destroy the temple or not, just right now, he's claiming to be God. Look now, you have heard his blasphemy. What do you think? And they answered and said, he is deserving of death. So he went to Annas. He's now with Caiaphas. They're now pronouncing the sentence. They needed witnesses to come forth and testify. But he incriminated himself. So he's deserving of death. Then they spat in his face and beat him. And others struck him with the palms of their hands, saying, prophesy to us, Christ. Who is the one who struck you? So what's going on? Once they've pronounced death, which which they actually don't have the power to carry out because it's against the Roman laws for them. They have to get the Romans to agree that he has to die because the Romans took away their power to kill people. You can't put people to death. You can send us and recommend to us, and then we'll decide if they can be dead or not. But as far as they're concerned, he's a condemned man. And so now they can do anything they want to him. You've been condemned already. So they spit in his face, they're beating him, and they're saying, prophesy to us, Christ, who struck you? Now, we're going to get a little more detail from Mark and from others about what happened. But let's start. So in Mark chapter 14, verse 65, it says, so some began to spit on him. Why are they spitting on him? Because this is the biggest insult that you can give to somebody in that culture, is to spit on him. Every culture has a particular insult that if you do that one thing, everybody goes, oh, I can't believe you did that, right? And we all decide differently what that is in our cultures. For example, in Deuteronomy chapter 25, if when a woman is married to a man and her husband dies, his brother is then supposed to take her in, because women in those days were not allowed to own property and be business owners. And so she's now going to be poor because that's not your property, that was your husband's property. So I'm glad we changed all that. And so the brother's supposed to take her in. In Deuteronomy 25, verse 7, it says, but if the man does not want to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go to the gate to the elders. Now, the gate is where the courts happen, and they get the gate. And say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up a name to his brother in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. He's supposed to take me in and my kids, right? Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him. But if he stands firm and says, I do not want to take her, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandal from his foot and spit in his face, and answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house. So the spitting in the face, that's it. You're now shamed in society. Someone spit in your face. Plus she took his sandal. So in verse 10, again, we're Deuteronomy 25:10, it says, and his name shall be called in Israel, the house of him who had his sandal removed. What? Yes, they will. She took your sandal, and that's what they're going to call him. But you are sandalized, and are sandalless. Well, you're minus a sandal, right? And so that's a thing in that culture. Taking off your shoe. You might recall we had a president that was overseas, and people were mad at him, and somebody took their shoe off and threw it at him, and that's like the worst insult. That just shows you how mad we are at you. Now that's interesting because in some cultures, like if you're in certain black gospel circles and you're singing real good, somebody might take their shoe off, and that's a compliment. Girl, don't make me take my shoe off. That means I'm going to hit you with my shoe because you're singing too good. I need to stop you. If you hit that high note one more time, either me or you's going to die. So I'm going to throw this shoe at you. So I was in a group of the Jubilee singers, and this one girl got up to sing, and it was ridiculous. She was so good. Tennis shoes started flying. She just kept ducking and kept singing. And the more the shoes flew, the more she knew I'm really singing. And people were not kidding because she was hitting notes that was killing people. And they said, I'm going to take you out. You're not going to take me out with that high note. So, and she recognized that was a compliment if they're throwing your shoe. But in another culture, you throw the shoe. Well, right in this culture, you're the man with one shoe. And that's horrible. But it starts with the spitting in the face, right? So they spit on Jesus to let him know you are now disgraced. Your house is disgraced. Your family's disgraced. So they spit in his face. In Mark chapter 14, verse 65, and then they blindfolded him. So Matthew doesn't mention that they blindfolded him. In Matthew, they just hit him and say, who hit you? Clearly, he would say, you did. But Mark brings in the detail that they blindfolded him and beat him and said to him, prophesy. And the officers struck him with the palms of their hands. So they're saying, because if you're such a prophet, then here. Now, who just hit you? Now, Jesus is not going to. Now, it's horrible that they are beating Jesus. This is horrible. But he's not going to fight back. He doesn't have to fight back. He's already won. He's about on his way to the cross. God was going to deliver wrath to all these people. And sometimes if we know God's going to take care of all this, You don't have to. I know you want to go and I'm going to go to that man and blah, blah, but God sees everything, and Jesus is sad for them. Like, oh my God, look how they are rejecting Jesus. Look how they're rejecting God. Look what's going to happen to them because he's pleading with them to listen. That's why he says, you're going to see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of glory. Do you not understand that all this is going to be torn down, and here you are spending all this energy mad at me when you need to be listening to my words. So it's them that are suffering, right? And sometimes we need to understand that God is looking. God sees what that person just did. So you want to, but God's more upset than you and already has their consequences planned. So we don't always have to answer back. In Luke chapter 22, verse 62 through 63, it says, now the men who held Jesus mocked him and beat him, and having blindfolded him, they struck him on the face and asked him, saying, prophesy, who is the one who struck you? And many other things they blasphemously spoke against him. Now, in Matthew's account, this is when Peter first denied Jesus. That's not true, right? There was 3 different locations and Jesus said that you'll be denying me 3 times, but he means in 3 different occasions. First was outside the gate before he even went into the courtyard. That's when he first did it. The second time is by the fire during the second trial. But in Matthew's version, Matthew 26, verse 69, it says, now Peter sat outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him saying, this is all while this meeting is going on, you also were with Jesus of Galilee. But he denied it before them all, saying, I do not know what you're saying. Me no speak the English, sort of thing. What are you? I don't know. I don't even understand you. So that's the first time Matthew mentions it. But the first time really was at the door. And only John would know that because only John was there when that happened, right? It was just John and Peter. In Mark chapter 14, verse 67, he also mentions this. So Mark and Matthew kind of line up as far as this first denial. But again, it's not. It's really the second denial. And when she saw Peter warming himself, she looked at him. So remember, Peter's at the fire. It's the second trial going on. They're beating Jesus right now, and it's Caiaphas's court is happening. And she looked at him and said, you also were with Jesus of Nazareth. Now, if Peter was going to at first think he was going to speak up for Jesus, now that they're spitting on him and have cursed his family and are beating him, he's certainly not going to speak up now, right? So you also were with Jesus of Nazareth. Now, she's just asking a question, but he denied it, saying, I neither know nor understand what you were saying. Meaning, I don't speak Hebrew. I don't know what, I know I just answered you in Hebrew, but that was an accident. I don't know what you were saying. I don't even understand you. So, and there's a reason why, because Nazareth is in Galilee, and the people in Galilee speak a different language. Now, I don't speak a different language. They have a different dialect, right? So like somebody from the South may say certain words differently. They may add more syllables to words that we think only have one syllable. A-N-D, we think is and, but they think it's A-N. Yeah, I had a teacher who would say Callias, but does she mean class? So, and she was the English teacher. It was frightening. But anyway, so it was similar in Galilee was more of a rural place, and all of the disciples, except for Judas, were from that Galilee area, interestingly enough. And Nazareth was in Galilee. Now, Jesus was born in Bethlehem, but he went to Galilee and found all his disciples. So Peter actually speaks differently. They could tell, Peter, you sound different. But he said, no, I don't understand you. Sorry. Here's his second denial. Here's how it happened. Here's when it happened. So in Matthew 26, verse 71, it says, and when he had gone out to the gateway, so they're beating Jesus, right? And this is actually the second, Matthew, Mark, I think it's the first one, was actually the second one. And when he gone out to the gateway, so he leaves and goes back toward the gate, another girl saw him, a different girl. Now he says another because he want to make sure it's not that first girl, and said to those who were there, hey, everybody, this fellow also was with Jesus of Nazareth, which is not, now I don't know if she's saying this to trap him or just one of those people, oh, hey, you look just like Hitler. I mean, does she know that she's about to get Peter jumped? because they're beating Jesus. And she, hey, this guy was with him too. So this is freaking Peter out. John 18:25. Here's the second time Peter denies him. Now Simon Peter stood and he warmed himself. So he's by the fire. The first time is at the gate. Second time is at the fire. He's on his way from the fire to the gate. And therefore they said to him, you are not also one of his disciples, are you? And he denied it and said, I am not. And in Luke 28:58, he's got the second one. After a little while, another saw him and said, you are also of them. But Peter said, man, I am not. Okay, now here's what's going on. It's not one person. There's 2 or 3 different people all saying, hey, you're with them. Hey, because there's a bunch of people there. So this is the second incident. We think there was just 3 different people who came up to Jesus. But there was 3 or 4 people at a time who would say, hey, no, aren't you with him? Yeah, well, didn't you say, right? Everybody would go, yeah, aren't you? You sound like you. So each writer of the gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, even John, picked one of those people to quote. So they each say, well, a girl said, or a man said, or because there was 3 or 4 different people around there. So it's the second incident of Peter denying Jesus. And Mark has his version, Mark 14:69, and the servant girl. So don't forget that Luke just said it was a man, but now it says the servant girl saw him again and began to say to those who stood by, hey, this is one of them. So innocently, a girl at the gate said it, but now it's building, right? Now people are saying stuff to other people. Hey, that's one of him too. Hey, this is while Jesus is getting beaten. People are pointing to Peter. Yeah. Hey, you guys. Right. So now it's attracting more attention to Peter, which is why he eventually left the fire and went to a different location, to the third location where he's going to deny Jesus. So in Matthew 26:17, it says, but again, he denied with an oath. I do not know the man. With an oath, like swear, I don't even know him. Now, and we shouldn't deny, but I can't say that none of us better than Peter. Jesus has just been grabbed by 600 Roman soldiers, brought to trial in front of the high priest who just sentenced him to death. And now they're spitting on him and beating him. And they're going, hey, you're with him. No, I'm not. So it's terrible that he denied Jesus, but because Peter's a human. And so I get it. Only Jesus would stand there and not say anything. So this is the third denial. Now, there is a time period of about an hour that passes before the third trial of Jesus, where they take him before the Sanhedrin. So if you read in all these different gospels, they'll say a while later or an hour later. Now, they didn't stand there with Jesus and just wait an hour. Let's just wait around for an hour. They don't mention what happened, but it is believed that they took Jesus downstairs of Caiaphas's basement. Recent archaeological discoveries, and if you go to Jerusalem now, they will show you Caiaphas's basement. They discovered Caiaphas's basement, which is like a torture chamber. It was beneath his house. There's like this compound, and it's a dungeon, and it has cells where prisoners were whipped, tortured, and in the one particular cell, prisoners were lowered into it on a harness using ropes to hold them. And they think this is where Jesus was for an hour. So they've started to beat him and spit on him already and prophesy. Who was this? But they think they took Jesus down to his cell and they're just torturing and beating him, trying to get some sort of confession out of him. Because he hasn't confessed yet. They've sentenced him to death and he hasn't said anything. So they're trying to get some confession. So that's what they think. They took Jesus for about an hour because this is the prison underneath Caiaphas's. But no, Peter didn't go there. John didn't go. None of them went there, so they don't know what happened. So they'll just say, like in Matthew 26:73, and a little later, Jesus comes back up, right? They bring him back up. Those who stood by came up and said to Peter, so there's nothing, time is passing. Jesus is down there and they're bringing him back up. So they said to Peter, surely you are what? He says, don't call me Shirley. Surely you are also one of them, for your speech betrays you. So now, because you sound different, he didn't have a southern accent. Whatever the accent was, it was rural and didn't sound like proper speech in Jerusalem. In Luke 22, verse 59, it says, then after about an hour had passed, Another confidently affirmed, saying, surely this fellow also was with him, for he's a Galilean. I can hear him. Peter kept getting himself in trouble, saying, I don't know the man. And you're not from California talking like that. We know. So Peter had just shut up, but they're saying, no, Jesus of Galilee, and you're talking like a Galilean over and over. But they're saying this to him because there's this at least an hour period of time where Jesus has disappeared with the soldiers who are beating him underground. So they're all just waiting. They're waiting for the third trial to begin, and Peter's warming himself and getting panicked and sweating, but getting identified more and more. So Mark 14, the second part of verse 70, same thing. And a little later, those who stood by said to Peter again, because they're just sitting there waiting for Jesus to come back up, surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean and your speech shows it. So, dude, stop pretending like you were not. No, I am not from the south. Okay, now I don't even know what that was. That was Martian. Okay, John 18, verse 26. It says, one of the servants of the high priest, a relative. Oh, this is what really got Peter upset. One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of him whose ear Peter cut off. Remember, John said, and that was Malchus. So John knew who Peter had cut off his ear, Malchus's ear. His brother, his relative. That word relative can be translated cousin or brother. And since they didn't know if he was his cousin or his brother, they just said relative. But so the brother or cousin of the guy whose ear got chopped off said, did I not see you in the garden with him? You really stick out to me because you cut off my brother's ear. Did I not see you I was there, in there, that was my relative, cousin or brother, who you chopped off your ear. So that's why now he freaks out. Right, his cousin, brother. I saw you there with him. You made yourself known. Had you kept your sword in your sheath, I would not have noticed you, but you stepped out of the crowd and said, let me just cut off an ear here. And so that was my brother or cousin. And so that's when Peter goes full crazy, right? Because they know where he's from. Malchus's cousin or brother says, wait a minute, I saw you with him. I'm not just doing it because of the accent. I saw you. John points that out because John loves pointing out the things that gets Peter in trouble. So Matthew 26, verse 74. Then he began to curse, this is Peter, and swear, saying, I do not know the man. Now, they didn't put all the cursing and swearing in, but that's why he went, hell to the no. I do not know. I don't even know why I'm here. I don't understand what you're saying. I don't speak your language. And I'm going to just curse because cursing means that, I'm right. So I do not know the man. And then immediately a rooster crowed. So that's the third place. He left the fire. He's trying to get away from it. It's during that time period when Jesus is underground being beaten, we're pretty sure. Otherwise, they're all just standing there for an hour staring at it. So they're pretty sure that Jesus was not there. That's why they're filling in this time with, wait a minute. Why? You're just more conspicuous. So, and immediately a rooster crows. Now, in Luke's version, Jesus has just come back right after the rooster crows. So in Luke 22, verse 61, it says, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Then Peter remembered. So this is right after the rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said to him, before the rooster crows, you'll deny me 3 times. Now, I just remind us, Mark got his version, we believe, from Peter. At the end of Peter's life, when he's in Rome, he tells that Mark is here and he's writing all these things down. So if you read Peter's epistles and stuff, that Mark is there and Peter's telling him all the story. So that's why Mark has certain details, like the man who ran up naked. Well, he didn't run up naked. He just left naked on the way and said, hey, and then they grabbed his bedclothes and he ran off. So Peter noticed that because Peter was there at a distance. John has certain details that other books doesn't have. Luke got a lot of his from former Pharisees, Nicodemus and Paul and others. And so there were things that they noticed from their perspective that other people didn't notice. And so one of them noticed that Luke that Jesus looked at Jesus after Jesus looked at Jesus. Help me, Lord. Jesus looked at Peter after the rooster crowed and says, "You will deny me," And then he remembered that Jesus says, "You're going to deny me 3 times." Okay. So Matthew 26, verse 75. And Peter remembered the words of Jesus, who had said to him, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." So he went out and wept bitterly. So he couldn't take it anymore. So Peter does not see the third trial, because at the end of the second trial, they're beating Jesus, they're spitting on him, they're whipping him. We believe they took him down to Caiaphas's dungeon. And if you go, when you take your trip to Jerusalem, they'll give you that tour. My friend Tim Chisholm took pictures when he was there and sent them to me recently, actually, because he says, "Oh, at one point you're going to get to this part, and you can see the dungeon. You can see how right beneath it, just excavated recently, where Caiaphas's house was, and so and there's a lot of contention because there are a lot of Arabs that control that area, and they don't want you to bother it, and so that's why it's taken a long time to do certain things. They've had to negotiate. So that's the second trial was with Caiaphas. First is with Annas. Second is with Caiaphas. Jesus is down. There's an hour of nothing to do. So for an hour, they're beating him, possibly had lowered him to this other pit, bring him up in time for Peter to do his third denial. The rooster crows, which was Jesus said. Here's the good news, though. Jesus told Peter, "You're going to do this, and I'm cool with it once you have been restored, because you're going to feel bad. I know you're going to mess up. When you have been restored, help your brothers, because they're all going to feel bad. You're all going to deny me. You're all going to run away. But there is redemption." And that's the good news. When we mess up, we have to understand that people in our lives are surprised. So as little kids, your parents might say, "Oh, I can't believe you did it," right? Because they told you not to do it and they're shocked that you did it. God's not ever shocked at anything that we've done. And so he doesn't have that same reaction. Sometimes we're like Adam and we want to hide from Jesus. Like when Adam sinned, they hid and they covered themselves, and God says, "Why are you hiding?" "Well, because I'm naked." "Who told you you were naked?" "Well, the devil put that thought in my mind. There's a serpent said something, made all the sense in the world." And so we're listening to the devil. "Well, God's mad at you now, and you know that you can't. Oh, you messed up, so you're gonna have to do 15 Hail Marys and 20 and God's like, "I knew you were gonna mess up. That's why I sent Jesus to the cross. Come to me, come to me." Right? And so he told Peter, "You're gonna deny me 3 times. It's okay. Once you have renewed yourself, and I'm going to meet you in Galilee, uh, which they're all talking about. You're from Galilee." He says, "I'm going to meet you in Galilee, and we'll renew ourselves, and then I want you to help your brothers." And that's when Peter said again, "I will never do that. So I don't need to restore my brothers." And that's when he said, "Peter, before the clock crows the third time, you will have denied me 3 times." Before the clock. So trust me. Now here he's weeping bitterly. He leaves because Jesus looks at him, and he looks at him not to say, "See, I told you." He looked at him and say, I knew this. It's okay. I knew you would do this." And God's looking at us saying the same thing. I knew that. It's okay. Just come to me. Repent. Confess your sin. Don't run away from me. But sometimes in the church, we teach God's angry at you when you sin, so you better not sin. As opposed to God knows you're going to sin. And that's why he's created this redemptive act for us. Run to him when you sin. If we would just teach it differently, there wouldn't be so many people outside the church afraid to come in, because they all think God's mad at them. They walk by churches and they cross themselves because we teach them God's mad at you. But the Bible teaches that we are ministers of reconciliation. We're supposed to spread the good. That's what the good news is. The gospel is the good news. Not the good news, God hates you. The good news is God is not mad at you, but he's forgiven your sins. So come to him, confess your sins, get forgiveness, get cleansing of the word and washing the water. And And Peter's doing the opposite here. He's running out. He's crying bitterly. Oh no, I betrayed him. And he said I would do it. He said you would do it so you would know that he already knew. He's not shocked. He didn't say it, do it to so he can say, ha ha, I knew it. He's saying, no, I knew this. And I told you in advance so that you would know. I already know. It's okay. Come to me. But Peter goes the other direction. Okay. So Peter remembered the words of Jesus, Matthew 26, verse 75, who had said to him, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. So he went out and wept bitterly. Now here's Luke's. Peter missed the third trial. Luke, who got a lot of his information from Pharisees, one of them was Paul. Paul was a Pharisee. Paul was there. And when Luke and Paul were traveling together in the book of Acts, Paul told Luke, and I'm sure Nicodemus and some of these others, here's what happened in front of the Sanhedrin. So that's why Luke has his information, nobody else does. Luke 22, verse 66. As soon as it was day, because they grabbed him at night, and it's midnight, and now it's toward dawning. So they didn't want to bring him for the whole Sanhedrin until it was daytime. He's not supposed to have a trial at night. The elders of the people, both chief priests and scribes, came together and led him into their council, saying, if you are the Christ, tell us. So this is the elders of the people, the chief priests, the scribes. Now he's in front of the whole Sanhedrin council, the third trial. If you're the Christ, tell us. But he said to them, if I tell you, you will by no means believe. And if I also ask you, you will by no means answer me or let me go. So if I tell you I'm the Christ, you won't believe me. If I ask you, who do you think I am? You won't answer me. Because I've asked you that before. I finally had to ask my disciples, who do men say that I am? Well, some say that you are the, right? So if I ask you, you will by no means answer me or let me go. So it's like, what's the point of answering this question? But hereafter, the Son of Man will sit on the right hand of the power of God. So he's warning them again. Judgment is coming, though. Then they all said, are you then the Son of God? So he said to them, you rightly say that I am. So again, they said, you are the Son of God, with a question mark. The English translated, are you the Son of God? But they said, you are the Son of God. And he says, you rightly say, I am. Now he's quoting, I am the great I am. He's saying that on purpose to make them crazy. And they said, what further testimony do we need? For we have heard it ourselves from his own mouth. So this was happening in front of the Sanhedrin. No one else was there. Luke knows about it because those Pharisees who did believe, who did repent, because you've got the covenant keepers and the covenant breakers. So it's not like all the Jews were bad. People who are persecuting Jews are out of their mind. They're crazy. There was a segment of them who did not believe Jesus and a segment who did, just like in today's world. So the Jews that believed him, that listened when he said, I am the Christ, who actually went and got his body and put him in their tomb, Joseph of Arimathea, Paul eventually came around. They remember what he said, and that's why we have this information. But the rest of them condemned him. The others just didn't speak up. It wouldn't have done no good. And they said, we've heard it for ourselves from his own mouth. And so they put him to death. So that's the third trial. Next week, we'll go into trial 4, 5, and 6 in front of Herod and Pontius Pilate, and then back again to the Sanhedrin. So thank you so much again for tuning in as we cover the trials of Jesus. And I will see some of you, I won't see you, but I'll talk to some of you on Sunday again at 9 a.m. Just remind you, the Sunday school is at 9 a.m., but you can watch it anytime you want, 10, 11, 12, doesn't matter. If you want to be live, though, it's at 9. And then the rest, I will see you next week at 7 o'clock. Again, thank you so much for listening in. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. In live video.